Starting your own business could be one of the best decisions you ever make. One that leads to independence, great control over your destiny, and possibly big rewards. Also, with many people unable to secure formal employment opportunities, starting your own business is a great way to earn a living and also learn invaluable skills that would translate to any career path you choose in life. The entrepreneurial route is not without risk. It requires long hours of hard work, capital, research, leadership and determination. And even then, it can still result in failure. To lend a helping hand, the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago held the Open Forum seminar entitled Youth and Entrepreneurship, Setting Up Your Business. This forum brought together professionals in their respective fields to advise on some of the tools and fundamental principles and practices that will help you achieve business success.
The Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, Tatt, hosted a workshop entitled ICT Skills for Development and Entrepreneurship Among Young People, in collaboration with the Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization and the Omar Dengu Foundation on August 19th and 20th, 2014 at the Hyatt Hotel in Port of Spain. The genesis for the workshop was the recognition that there was a growing need for information among young persons who were desirous of starting a business in the information and communications technology space. The workshop was designed to help young people build entrepreneurial skills and develop innovative ways of doing business in ICTs. Apart from the information disseminated at the workshop, the program also included presentations from successful business people and ICT experts who shared their expertise with participants in order to create business models based on the participants' own ideas. Feedback from the workshop was overwhelming, and it became clear that follow-up sessions were required.
Along the entrepreneurial route, there are mandatory procedures that must be adhered to. One such procedure is registering with the National Insurance Board or NIB. Radish Basant from the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago shares some invaluable information on these processes.
NIS is one of the compulsory deductions by law. All right? You don't have to ask for it to be deducted. It's a requirement by the employer to register you. So when you do become an employer, and by an employer I mean once you hire an employee. Now some of you can actually be an employer without hiring an employee. If it is you, let's say you freelance and you incorporate your business where you might be the managing director and your spouse or somebody else or some other partner might be a director, you could actually be a salaried employee where you're the only employee of the company. All right, so once you have an employee, which you can be classified as if it is you are incorporated and you are a salaried director, managing director as it is, then you would be required to register yourself as an employer with the National Insurance Board and make contributions for yourself. Now the contributions that you'll be making to the national insurance system, it qualifies you for certain benefits, and these benefits we provide for you is benefits where you might find yourself in certain situations or certain contingencies where it's unexpected. You might fall sick, and you might fall sick for extended periods. You may not have any sort of coverage, and for the period that you're losing earnings, whether it be through sickness or some women go off on maternity, for that 14-week confinement period, we provide a number of benefits to you as a working person. You might get injured while carrying out a work-related function. All right, so there's a number of benefits we provide for you while it is you're working. And later on in life, we have the benefit when you have a reduction in earnings when it is you do retire. You may have some other sorts of retirement benefit in the form of a company pension. Some of you may have annuities, but you also have the national insurance retirement benefit to cushion that blow when you have that reduction in income from your regular earnings. Now, the contributions that you will be paying doesn't just work for you while you're alive, because you have certain loved ones who will be depending on your earnings. Some of us are parents. Some of us actually take care of our parents. So even for persons who have kids under the age of 19, or even for persons who are living with their parents and contributing to their parents' welfare, your contribution actually pays benefits to those persons as well through our survivors' benefits.
You were speaking about the company registering. Now, if you're registered as a company, you have to have, well, the minimum to start up with is 2 directors and a secretary.
That's right.
One of the director could actually act as a secretary, but do you still have to register them for NIS?
All right. For you to be incorporated as a company, you must have at least 2 persons, one being a managing director, one being a director, and you must have a corporate secretary as well, which one of the parties registered as either the director or the managing director could also act in that capacity. Now, you could have a company and no salaried employees, and some of you, when you start off your business, when you're now starting up, a lot of your investments into the business will be, and the returns that you're getting will be reinvested into the business. And for many months into the startup period, you don't actually receive a salary. Contributions paid, to the National Insurance Board is based on salaries that you earn and that you receive. So if you are not in receipt of a salary, then you are not required to register with the National Insurance Board.
Donnie Bechan, who specializes in startup business, and Stephen Page, founder of Startup Funding Club, outline the stages in business development and what investors generally look for.
There are several stages of, business life cycle. So we're going to explore those now. So first of all, we have the idea. So you're going to take over the world. All right? So if that's the first thing. You have this brilliant idea that you're going to, do something great with. Cricket website, CEO'd by Brian Lara. Then the next thing you do is you try to have a prototype. With your prototype, you have something tangible that you can take to the market and get people to start playing around with to make sure that what you have is actually usable by other people. You can also take this to investors. It doesn't have to be, the final product in any way, shape, or form. It just needs to demonstrate some of the basic features. There are different levels of prototypes. Some people think prototypes is a final product. It doesn't have to be a final product. It can be actually a paper drawing that you can walk somebody through, right? Next thing is the all-famous MVP, which is the minimum viable product. This is the product with the least amount of features that makes it useful for somebody. So with an MVP, you usually start getting users to use your product and give you additional feedback. So I stole this from my last presentation. It doesn't have to be great, it just needs to work.
You don't need any prerequisites such as people having a degree or anything like that. You work with startups of everybody.
I don't care about whether you have a degree or not. There are lots of people who don't have degrees who are very passionate about what they do. And that's the most important criteria. You just have to be dedicated. You have to, understand what your market is, what you want to achieve, and just be very passionate about what you want to do.
Stephen Page, founder and CEO of Startup Funding Club in the UK, shares his expertise and outlines the initial requirements for seed funding.
So when someone comes along with their startup and says, we've got the best thing since sliced bread, fantastic new thing, it's a wonderful thing, I think it's fantastic. Okay, you invented it or you created it, you're bound to think it's fantastic. Who else thinks it's fantastic? Who outside of your friends and family think this is something that that people should back and invest in? So for me, those are the 3 main things. A great idea that's got to the certain stage of prototype, a great team behind it, and someone outside of that team or some entities outside that team saying it's a great idea. That can be researchers, it can be press, PR, it can be revenues, of course. If there's early revenues, even the better. So, long way of answering the question, but those are the 3 main things that we look for.
You're from London. Have you invested beyond the borders of London before? Do people approach you internationally? How exactly does this funding club work?
Okay, so in the UK, there are some very good tax efficient ways of investing. So what we have invested in overseas companies, but we would ask those overseas companies typically to set up an office in the UK so that the tax benefits can be taken. An example of the tax benefits that are available in the UK is what's called SEIS, and Donnie can explain that, but it's basically an investor in the UK can invest, let's say he puts £20,000 into a company, he can get 50% of that back from the UK government.
Now that you manage to get your business operational, you have the legal responsibility of taxation to the state.
If you're in business, there are 4 types of taxes that you must pay. Income or corporation tax. Income and corporation tax is paid on profits, not on income, not on gross income, on profits. So if you're operating at a profit, it means that you're going to have to pay income tax or corporation tax. If you're operating at a loss, then you will not pay income or corporation tax. And as it indicates, income will be to the sole trader, corporation tax to the limited liability, the incorporated individual, okay? Then you have business levy. Business levy, I'll say it now so that when I get to the slide, I'll probably just run through it. Business levy is paid by both the self-employed person and the incorporation. But there is a 3-year exemption on for business levy. For an individual, a self-employed person, it will be 3 years after you have actually commenced business. So even though you may have registered your business as a self-employed person and you don't start up your business until 10 years later, 3 years after that 10 years, you're exempt. For individual or self-employed persons, it's 3 years after commencement of business. For an incorporated person, it is 3 years after the registration of the business. All right? And then we have green fund levy. This is only payable by a partnership. Then we have green fund levy. This is payable only by a partnership and by an incorporated person. And sole trader does not pay green fund levy. The rate of green fund levy is 0.1% of your gross income, and the rate of business levy is 0.2% of your gross income. And then we have health surcharge, which is only paid by the self-employed person and partners within a partnership. All right? The only tax that a partnership pays is green fund levy. Business levy, health surcharge, and income tax is paid by the partners in the partnership. So if you have if you're operating a partnership, the only tax that the partnership itself would pay is the green fund levy tax. Every non-emolument income earner, which is a self-employed person or so, is required to pay his or her taxes to the Board of Inland Revenue at a rate of 25% of the chargeable income. This applies to both company and a self-employed. 25% of your chargeable income, chargeable profits. That means that is not your gross income. You're going to be allowed all your business expenses, and whatever is left, whatever your profit is, that's what you pay your taxes on. You're not allowed to deduct personal expenses. And this could happen in the case of a sole trader, and it could also happen in the case of a very small incorporated business. So you are not allowed any personal expenses, any private expenses. The expenses must be solely business expenses. And then we'll have like where you're a sole trader, some of your expenses may be apportioned, depending on what the expense is.
So for a sole trader, one of the first questions, and one of the questions I had when I broke out on my own, was would I have to pay would I have to file 2 sets of taxes? One for the company that's registered, and me being the employer/employee, the sole one, would I have to file for myself as well?
Then you only need to file one tax return. even if you remain being both an emolument income earner and a non-emolument income earner, meaning that you're self-employed, sole proprietorship, you file one income tax return, and there is a specific return for you. We call it the 400 ITR. On that return, you're going to indicate your emolument income earnings, and you're going to indicate your non-emolument income earnings. You're going to support your emolument income earnings with your TD4 certificate, and you're going to support your non-emolument income earnings with a statement of income and expenditure, your profit and loss statement.
Maintaining your right to express and protect your ideas for your organization is essential. Let patency and copyright laws guide you along the way.
Now, a quick definition of what is intellectual property. Simply, it refers to the expressed creations of the mind. Basically, you have an idea, you think of it, it becomes valuable, it becomes intellectual property when you express it in a physical, tangible form. So as you were saying, copyright, logos, trademarks, right? Now, quickly onto some of the functions of the Intellectual Property Office. We grant intellectual property rights. We make intellectual property information available to the public, which is what we are doing right now. We receive international applications. We promote inventiveness. We provide patent information services. And we participate in the development of international treaties. So intellectual property can be broken down into two major areas. And to help guide you through the first area, I would like to call on my colleague, Mr. Richard Atching.
But basically, anytime you hear about copyright, you're talking about literary and artistic works. You might be wondering, how is software literary and artistic? At least in our country, under our copyright law, software is one of those things that are included as a literary and artistic work. Okay? And of course, the usual books, poems, writings, movies, audiovisual, dramatic productions on stage. Now, whenever we speak about rights, there's always a counterbalance of what we call exceptions. Like what you cannot enforce your rights against. And in the case of copyright, there are some things which are not covered by copyright. Because we get calls all the time for various things. Especially concepts. We always get peppered with questions about concepts. And just to let you know the distinction we make, sometimes you claim that somebody stole my idea. And nobody can steal your ideas. What they try to steal is your expressed ideas. That's why we use the word expressed in the definition. So once you put your idea onto paper, or you performed it, sung it, danced it, programmed it, then it becomes tangible, and then it becomes eligible for protection.
For most programming, there's an algorithm you follow, some sort of logic. But the logic I apply to solve the same problem and be different from the next programmer. So is there rights to protect the algorithm, or actually just trying to solve the problem? So if the problem is to do 3D rendering, can I somehow protect anybody else from doing 3D rendering, or the processes that I use to get that 3D rendering done?
That's another. let me put some baselines here. Intellectual property belongs to the creator. First principle in IP, first circle, right? If you create, you own. If you create, next circle. You create in the context of employment. So for an employer, and there's some definitions of what is an employer and what is an employee. Your employer owns the IP. If you are a freelancer who has been contracted, you don't have an employer-employee relationship. It's a work for hire. And in that situation, the IP still belongs to the creator, the guy the freelancer. That's an important distinction to make when people are drawing up contracts, and people get things very wrong, because there's a presumption here in Trinidad that if I exchange property, then the rights, and I exchange money, that the rights also change hands as well. That is not the case. If I'm a wedding photographer, you approach me for what's the finished product? An album or a disc of pictures, whatever. I delivered an album and a disc full of pictures. The rights to reproduce the photographs belong to the photographer. Just remember that. If you want the originals, you pay more. I get asked this question from programmers because people tell them, well, I want the compilers and the tools. And I said, and you have to make it clear to the client, if I give you my tools, I can't make any more. So, and we've had that issue with programmers having to argue with the client who wants everything. You can get everything, but you have to pay for it.
I have drones, and me giving a drone to somebody to go and fly, you would say that I own the footage.
Who's doing the shooting? You or the...
I am not present. Actually, I work offshore, so that's the only way I can run my company. So when I have business, I send someone. I recently actually lost a drone and lost the footage with it. And it's so tricky, you know, in terms of the property loss, there's no value to it because it's not recoverable. But the person also came to me prior to that, and he said he wanted to rent, which I think changes the terms. Because if he rents equipment from me, does that make the intellectual property his?
Yes. I give it. It's similar to guys like photography companies that rent cameras. You can actually go and rent a camera for Carnival. Essentially, if you rent a camera from those guys, they don't own what you shoot. You, the photographer, own what you shoot. So I think technically, if the guy rents your drone and he's doing the shooting and he's the one angling the drone and picking the shots and the flyby speed, that's his creative talent, his genius.
Right, but if he works for me, if it, in terms of him doing the job for me, then
now we
I
talk
own
about
it.
an employee, and if he's an employee, whatever he creates or shoots belongs to the employer. I think that's a major distinction in that you have to be aware of when you engage persons. Meaning that if you have to engage a third party, we usually advise people, however you drop that contract and you want to get ownership of that stuff, you have to put that in the contract that in addition to you delivering so and so and so, you will hand over copyright in writing. It happens with the advertising agencies all the time. They hire third-party jingle writers all the time. And they make those jingle writers sign over everything. Because what you don't want later is somebody coming out of nowhere to sue you and say, that's mine, I want my share, blah, blah, blah. If you're familiar with the conundrum in business, if you're not successful, you're not famous, nobody will harass you. You'll also starve. If you're successful, and hands will come out of nowhere for their share. And we always advise people, try and settle these things before you start the project. And make sure everybody understands this, and you're working for me, here are the terms. Because it's useful to spell out the terms. Or if you're being contracted by me, here are the terms. That's useful to get out of the way early o'clock because it really gets messy later until we see the mess afterwards. Well, thank you very much for your rapt attention.